The sound you hear is a video cassette on the back end of a 3-day rental from the local mom and pop shop, rewinding in the family VCR. This is the start of Octoberpod. In these days of bland streaming thumbnails, often excreted by AI and engineered to manipulate eye movement, swipes or scrolls, and button clicks, but not to be aesthetically pleasing, it seems we've lost the knack of producing really dynamite cover art. The days of planning your Friday night around a trip to the video store, alone or with a friend, and carefully combing through the shelves of colorful and lurid VHS boxes for the perfect 3 or 5 or 7-day rentals have been replaced by hours of sitting alone on the couch, scrolling through an endless parade of movies you've never heard of / don't care about, and either falling asleep before you've made a selection or settling on an old favorite you've seen 138.666 times. Like a YouTube thumbnail, a good VHS box image grabs your attention and sells you what you want to see. But there was more to a video box than just the cover art. There were roughly 3 kinds of boxes. First, there was your basic bottom-loading cardboard slipcase. 99% of the VHS tapes you'd encounter came in this style of box. Most of your new releases, big budget or big studio movies, cheap bargain bin transfers, or nearly all tapes available for retail purchase came in these slipcase boxes. The cover art and the names on the box did all the talking, and that's just about all it did. Then there were clamshell cases. These were made of plastic and opened up like a book or a trapper keeper, with a cavity inside to snugly hold the tape. VHS tapes for retail purchase rarely came in clamshells until much later, when boutique labels like Anchor Bay started packaging their releases in them, or when Disney decided to open up the video vault. Otherwise, you'd only encounter these in rental stores. Walt Disney Home Video and Warner Brothers both had distinctive clamshell packaging. And long before the MCU was a thing, Prism Video packaged Marvel cartoons in eye-catching, comic art-adorned clamshells. But you could also find some weird as fuck horror releases in clamshell cases. And so, a clamshell promised either A1 Robusto Primo blockbusters and or family entertainment, or maybe something like Legend of the Wolf Woman. And then there were the big boxes. These were constructed like the cardboard slipcase boxes, but were wider and deeper, large enough to contain a vacuum-formed plastic seat in which to nest the cassette. You might find the odd Canon Films release in a big box, but 5 will get you 10 that any big boxes on the shelf contained either a skin flick or some weird, usually foreign horror or exploitation picture. Of course, there are other box formats that I'm leaving out, side loaders and curiosities like book boxes and slide drawer boxes, but these were the big 3. You could always tell a tape had been sitting on a shelf facing a window too long, like the new releases shelf, because the box art would be sun-washed and faded. And horror pictures, especially if the horror section was in a dark back corner of the store, always seemed to have extra dusty display boxes. As you can tell, I have fond memories of these video store days, and I have the box art for dozens of horror movies burned into my memory. During the intermission, I'm going to share with you my picks for some of the most haunting VHS box art of all time. But first, Hannah, from the podcast Murder Bucket, has something extra weird and spooky for your uneasy listening. I'll see you in a bit at the concession stand.
you're hearing this, you have stumbled across Murder Bucket, the true crime podcast, with me, Hannah Palmer. You sent me your ghost and paranormal stories, and I am going to read them. All right, so these first few stories are from the host of Unsolved VA podcast. I used to photograph headstones for a website. I was in a family cemetery, pretty good size, about 100 square feet, but it was at the end of a road on the top of a hill surrounded by trees. Only one way in and out. The parking area was clearly visible from anywhere in the cemetery. After a few minutes, I started feeling like I was being watched. I've never felt that in a cemetery before, so this isn't something I'd just say. It was bad enough that I kept stopping and looking around. Nothing. I finally found the graves of the matriarch and patriarch. I said to myself, okay, I'll photograph these and then leave. Many years ago, people liked to plant yucca by headstones for some reason. Both of their headstones were obscured by yucca in front of them. I reached down and pushed the yucca aside with one hand so I could take the picture of her headstone with the other. Just as I was about to take the picture, I saw something through the viewfinder and thank goodness looked over the camera. It was the biggest black widow I had ever seen, and it had crawled up the yucca plant headed directly for my hand. Southern black widows grow up to 1.5 inches, including their legs. This girl was at least 2.5 inches. The red hourglass was so big it immediately popped out at you. I screeched like a little girl, jumped back, told the matriarch I didn't mean any harm, and I was so sorry to disturb her, and I immediately left. I would have also screeched like a little girl and immediately ran away without saying anything to the matriarch. The next story we have is from Holly Murray from Spooky Hour Podcast. I have a few stories to tell you, all tied to my legendary haunted basement. Okay, it's only legendary to me and my friends. We've always felt weird vibes down there since we were kids. Our playroom was down there, but we never wanted to be down there alone. I remember this sinking feeling in my stomach every time I went downstairs. I don't really remember anything happening until I was around 16 years old. My parents converted the basement into an apartment for me, and I lived down there full time. The first WTF moment happened when I was brushing my teeth one night. The mirror in my bathroom faces the door, so if the door is open, it reflects into the hallway. I saw what I thought was my little sister run by in the reflection. I distinctly remember seeing a long brown ponytail swinging as she walked by. I yelled out, "Riley, I saw you," because I thought she was just trying to scare me. She didn't answer, so I went out into the hallway and no one was there. I called upstairs something along the lines of, "You asshole, I know it was you." But nobody answered. I went upstairs and no one was home. I was by myself. I locked myself in my bedroom for the night. I saw that brown ponytail like 4 more times in the mirror before I finally decided to shut the bathroom door every time I was in there. Girl, same. A few years later, I had some bags packed on my bedroom floor as I was going away for the weekend. I put my flat iron in my bag and wrapped the cord around it, tucking it in there. When I woke up in the morning, my flat iron was on my floor, cord stretched out in a perfect straight line. Most of my ghosty experiences have been harmless, but this next one really shook me. I was in bed and I kept feeling a sting in my back. I thought there was a spider or a mosquito or something biting me. I finally got up and turned the light on and found a large sewing needle poking through my mattress as if it had been shoved up from underneath, pointy side up, poking me in the back. I didn't even own a sewing kit at the time. I still experience some things down there today. Items moving, random bumps in the night, lights flickering, that icky gut feeling, etc. We've done Ouija boards and other experiments down there, and we did experience some things. I was able to get a name one night, and I think it was Susan, but I don't really remember because we were drinking. I'd love to do a full investigation down there someday. I think my ghost is friendly. Let's hope that's a friendly ghost. The next story is from the host of the Tipsy Exchange podcast. I'm pretty certain my roommate created a poltergeist in our apartment when I was in college. After we had been living there for a little bit, we started noticing weird little things. For example, we had a change jar in the living room, and every once in a while, there would be just random coins all over the living room floor. Neither of us would have done it. Also, our guests would see things that we hadn't even told them about. There was always a shadow that you could see walking across my roommate's bedroom into the closet. She and I spent a whole night taking turns driving around the area trying to recreate the shadow from headlights or something, and we couldn't do it. Plenty of people saw that. And if you were in the kitchen by yourself, looking in the fridge, you would get a tap on your shoulder. That happened to multiple people. Then things started getting crazy. Like the volume on stereos would go up by themselves, and my roommate swore that she got pushed when she was in the shower. And I was a terrible roommate, so I think I could be why she made a poltergeist. Whatever it was, it all stopped after she moved out. This next story is from the host of Twisted and Uncorked podcast. I have a story about my time working at the old spaghetti factory and dealing with the appropriately named Spag Ghost. I worked at the old spaghetti factory for about 8 years. I won't say which location, but I will say that it is in Canada. The furniture and decor that is brought in, anything from mirrors, masks, stained glass lamps, tables, chairs, paintings, etc., are all genuine antiques, and no one really knows where they originate, as they are sold mostly at auctions and antique stores. I think the hauntings come from these objects. In my time there, I met my today husband, made lifelong friends, and endless memories. But I am here to tell you of the 4-year period I managed there and the unreal spooky shit that happened to me. All of the managers experienced something in one way or another, but mine were more frequent and more extreme. I think this is because I am an empath and I am already open to this sort of stuff. One night I managed, we had a large birthday party in the back section of about 30 people. It was a kid's birthday with a dinosaur theme, and the mom brought in a bundle of helium balloons, along with a buttload of other decorations. At the end of their dinner and cake, the mom handed out the balloons to any kid that wanted to take one home. One was heavily played with, and she told me it had a leak in it and asked that I toss it. I let her know that it was no issue. I would clean it all up after they left if they didn't want to take the decorations home. I specifically remember bringing a big armful of decorations, including this balloon that was leaking helium, and throwing it in the back garbage can behind the restaurant. I closed that evening and unfortunately had to be back in the next day to open. Other than the kitchen crew, managers were the first to arrive to set up the service area and restaurant before opening. The next morning, I walked into the back door and around the corner to find that same balloon floating in front of the bread drawers in the kitchen. I thought maybe one of the kitchen guys were playing a trick on me, but it occurred to me that the balloon was not holding helium the night before, and it was almost flat when I threw it out. How was it there floating? Nope, the kitchen guys had no idea what I was talking about and said it was there when they got there in the morning. I ran that balloon back out to the garbage feeling very unsettled. The barroom door was a never-ending game. One aspect of closing the restaurant obviously involved shutting off all the lights and setting the alarm. The switch and alarm panel were located in the bar room next to the bar at the front of the restaurant. Since it is the last thing to do, I would go in, shut off the lights, and set the alarm before huffing it out the front door and locking it before the timer went off. I would then walk to the back of the restaurant and get into my car. I would drive out to the front to start heading home, and I noticed that the bar room light was on after I had shut it off, and the door was open again. I would then park, get out of my car, unlock the front doors, disable the alarm, shut off the light, enable the alarm, shut the door, and run to the front to lock it and go out the front door. The next morning, my general manager told me that I left the bar room door open and the lights on. I told him what happened, and his response was, "Yeah, sounds about right," indicating to me that these things have happened to him as well. Now, this last one happened to me when I had first started at the restaurant as a busser. I was 16 years old and saving for a car, so on Friday and Saturday nights, I would offer to close since only one busser was needed until the very end of the night. My general manager asked if I would go do a bathroom check and make sure that there were no lasting customers before the host locked the front door from the inside and then left out the back. We also had to make sure that the toilets were flushed, the garbage was pushed down, and any tissue or spills on the ground were cleaned up. I remember going into the men's room first and doing a little peek under the two stalls. No one was there. I finished and went into the girls' room. The girls had 8 stalls in 2 rows of 4. I went up to one row, pushing back every stall door, which would make a little slam noise as it hit the back door stops, and cleaned up the stalls. I was the only one in there, and suddenly I felt a push out of one stall and the door slammed behind me and locked. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt Spag Ghost. At that time, I had no idea the restaurant was haunted, and this struck me as weird, but I continued down the rows. Another stall door slammed. Nope. I went running out of there, and I would never go into the bathrooms again without a work buddy. It has been 3 years since I worked there, and every time myself and another friend or past manager have to use the bathroom, we go in a buddy system to this day. That was 10 years ago. Here's another story. The house I grew up in was definitely haunted and is still in my family. It was a large farmhouse on 3 acres where my aunt, uncle, cousin, and godson still live. I grew up in the basement suite with my family, but spent many hours upstairs when my parents were at work. My brother and I ate dinner upstairs almost every night, and our cousins were more like siblings. All 4 of us were 4 years apart, and given all that young and sometimes angsty energy, our ghost was very active. Funny enough, now that we are all grown up and my cousins have kids of their own, the activity has started up again with all the grandkids in the house after being dormant for about 10 years after we grew up. Interesting how that works. So let's go back to the late 1990s. My younger brother is 6, I am 10, and my cousins upstairs are 14 and 18. While my aunt and uncle rarely saw the strange happenings, they knew there was an energy in the house, and they neglected to tell us that the previous couple that lived in the home had lived there since the house was built in 1969, and when in old age, the man, named George, passed away in his sleep in the living room armchair. Shortly after that, the house was sold to my aunt and uncle, and my family moved in downstairs. Since we didn't have a lot of money growing up, my family lived there for next to nothing. A very close-knit family. Whenever something strange would happen, my aunt's response was always, "Oh, that's just George." Usually it was, but there was a darker energy in the house that was only felt at the end of the hallway where the linen closet was. It was the end of the hall in between my aunt and uncle's bedroom and my oldest cousin's room. There was also the corner that was a choice for all timeouts since it was secluded from the living room and kitchen where my cousins and brother would play. Every time I went down there, nose in the corner, it was the longest and most terrifying 10 minutes of my life. I used to beg to be put in any other corner, and the grown-ups would never understand why. I would hear whispers coming from inside the closet, very penny-wise in the sewers and drains, etc. And it was freezing over there. Not to mention, I would feel the occasional hand push my face further into the corner. Ew. This wasn't so much a closet as it was a tiny, tiny door, no more than 5 feet tall, and there was no latch or click for it to close. It was just a handle and we would push it closed. Often, we would circle to go to the hall and find the closet wide open. Nope. My uncle owns his own business and his work desk was behind the wall in this tiny room between the kitchen and the living room, but it was on the wall on the other side of the kitchen table. The phone would often ring when we sat down for dinner. Obviously, we let it go to voicemail. And more times than I can count, the voicemail would beep and there would be a raspy, scratchy noise, breathing, or only a few words spoken by a Dr. No-sounding creep. I sensed that this was whatever used to push my head into the corner and whisper out of the closet. Again, I say nope. Now for George. When my great-grandma passed away, she left behind beautiful music boxes for me and my 2 cousins, the girls, and an antique toy truck for my brother. We each had our own music boxes in our respective rooms, and George definitely liked to make himself known in the house. My music box in particular was the kind that you would have to wind the back and then open it. Since I was a dancer, mine had a little ballerina in it, and at least once a week, this would wind and open in the middle of the night while I slept. Not cool, George. My aunt and uncle are the type of people that drink milk with dinner. We later learned that George was lactose intolerant because every now and again, the milk glasses on the dinner table would just tip over without being touched. And one time, it actually exploded to the point that my uncle went around checking for a gunshot hole in the kitchen windows. Candles in the living room would light and burn out on their own. The TV would shut off around 10 o'clock every evening. My aunt would always say, "George, it's not my bedtime." We were the family that stayed up watching movies at the end of the day, and while the 10 p.m. shutoff was inconvenient, we always knew what time it was. One really nice memory of George that I definitely thank him for is when we were little, we used to slide down the stairs on our butts when we would go to my suite and bedroom. We decided to make it a laundry basket surf day, and the upstairs went straight down, then curved into a wall at the bottom before it turned. I was unsuccessful with my surf to say, and I knew I would be hitting the wall. Thankfully, though, my laundry basket just stopped before the bottom step, like somebody had blocked me. I would have definitely broken my nose otherwise. My cousin was at the bottom of the stairs, bewildered, as my laundry basket hovered between 2 stairs at the bottom. While he could be a pest at times, ultimately, he brings good energy and protects us little kids that grew up there through the generations. Oh my goodness, that was so intense. All of those little teeny tiny stories about George. I love it. Give me more. This next story is from my husband. Either my great or great-grandfather reportedly owned a haunted house. There was an old picket fence with a gate, and the house had a porch. From time to time at night, my dad told me that you could hear a horse right up to the gate. It would open and slam, and then there would be stomping footsteps up to the porch. The footsteps would end on the stairs. Even more rarely, there would be a gunshot at the end of the event. From what my dad has told me, the only thing that you could see was the gate open and slam. Everything else were just sounds. My family isn't sure what incident happened that left that imprint, but it had to have been very important to the rider of the horse. That one also just gave me goosebumps all over. And the final 2 stories are mine. I believe I shared this first one in our Q&A episode, but here we are, ghost story episode. I'm just going to tell you again. When I was in high school, probably around 2006 or 2007, I worked in an assisted living. That was like the career path I really wanted to go into when I was in high school, working with the elderly in some way, shape, or form. So as my high school job, I worked at this assisted living in the town I lived in. And this assisted living was in the shape of a horseshoe. So you walk in the front door and there is the dining room right in the middle. You have the kitchen right behind that. And you have like the nurse's station kind of on either side of the kitchen. And then down the like horseshoe hallways were all the residents' rooms. And at the end of both hallways, there were like emergency exits leading to the outside. So one evening, I was actually working a night shift. This was probably during the summertime, so I could do it and not have to worry about school. So I worked the night shift, and I was on like the team with the nurses. So I walked around and helped give out medication. I like cleaned up the residents, gave them showers. I gave them food, kind of helped clean up wherever was needed. So this particular night, we were walking around the hallways to check on all the residents at bedtime, to give them their medications, make sure that everybody was in their rooms and nobody needed anything. And if they did, we could go get them. So at this particular assisted living, all of the residents wore these call buttons around their necks or like on their pants or on their wrist or something. And the way that these particular ones worked is if you pushed the call button, the box in the nurse's station would pop up with whose call button it was and where this call button was located. So it would either tell you that they were in a specific room, that they were in a hallway, they were in the dining room, they were in the like family room, or they were outside on the porch. So this particular night, we were doing our normal rounds and a resident's call button went off. So we went back to the nurse's room and we looked on the little box to figure out who it was. And it was this sweet little old lady, and I can't remember her name, but she had lived there for a long time. And the call button said that it was coming from her room, like she was in her room. So we immediately went to her room. We knocked on her door, no answer. We decide to just go ahead and open the door in case, say, something is wrong. Maybe she's passed out, she's unconscious, whatever. So we decide to go into her room and the lights are turned off. We walk in, we call her name, no answer. Walk in just a little bit further. We have the light turned off this entire time. So we walk in just a little bit further, we call her name again, and all of a sudden we hear, "Can you help me?" And this little old lady had like a very sweet, mellow, calming voice. Like, "Oh, I'm so cute, blah, blah, blah," you know, that kind of thing. This "Can you help me?" was a high-pitched voice. It was loud. It was bold. It was there. So that was definitely not this resident. So the nurse that I am with turns the light on and we go further into the room, like to the person's bed. This woman is sound asleep. So we kind of like shake her leg a little bit, wake her up, and she wakes up and is like, "Hi, is everything okay? Can I help you?" And we're like, "Your call button went off. We came inside to kind of check on you. Want to make sure everything's okay." She's like, "No, I've been asleep the whole time." So then we ask her where her call button is, and it is around her wrist, underneath the covers, nowhere where she could have like accidentally pushed it or anything. So we ended up leaving her room and going back to doing our rounds. And we noticed that the call button for that particular resident goes off again. But this time, it says that she is in the other hallway, which is not where her room is. So, of course, we go down that hallway. There's nobody there. We go back to the resident's room. We walk in. We don't turn the light on. We say, hello. Is anybody there? Everything okay? And again, we hear that voice. Hey, can you help me? We turn the light back on. The resident is still in her bed. She wakes up again, asks if everything is okay. We kind of just say, no, we're just checking on you, and we leave and kind of hope that it doesn't happen again. And after that, it never went off again. Her call button never went off, and I believe she ended up passing away a few months later. So we ended up telling our supervisor about this a little while after she died, and the supervisor said that there was another woman who lived in her room before her, and when we described like the voice and like high pitched and super like loud and bold, she said, yep, that's the person who lived in her room before. She was very like animated and loud and bold, and that was definitely her voice. So, oof. Super creepy, lots of chills. Had a very hard time working the night shift after that, but you know, you gotta do what you gotta do to get money during high school. And the very last story I have is actually a dream. My mom passed away in 2017, and for about 7 months, we didn't know exactly what had happened. We had been waiting on the autopsy results for that long. And if you want to hear that story about the horrible email I sent to the medical examiner, you're more than welcome to ask me and I'll tell you about it. So after we finally got the autopsy results back, and we learned that she died of an accidental overdose, she had depression and mental health issues probably her entire life and misused her prescriptions. So this was kind of an at fault of hers. So the dream that I had after we learned of the autopsy report was I dreamed that I could see like my dad, my husband, my brother, and my mom, and like we were all in an airport together. And everybody, I could see their faces, they could talk to me and everything. But every single time that my mom would turn around, her face would be just completely blank. So that was the only dream that I had about that. But then several months later, I had another dream with her in it. And this time, it was me and her were like working in this same company. And we were like in a stairwell together. And this time, I could see her face, and her response to me was, I'm sorry and I'm sick. So I believe that was her coming to me in a dream and telling me that she was sorry for the things that she had done, and that she was finally admitting that she had a mental health issue and depression and anxiety. That she was kind of finally owning up to it, because the entire time she was alive, she never really admitted that she had a problem with her prescription medication, and that kind of thing. So those are all of our ghost stories and paranormal stories tonight. This was a fantastic episode. So thank you for sending in all your stories, and I really hope you enjoyed this.
It's intermission time, folks. Today we're talking about VHS box art, and I'm here to give a rundown of what I think are some of the most haunting horror movie VHS covers. I say haunting because some of these images are scarier than others. Some are gorier than others. Some might not really be scary or aesthetically pleasing at all, but all of them left a lasting impression on me that's lingered for 35 years or so. Now I realize that I'm using an audio-only medium to discuss a purely visual art form. So, check down in the show notes for links to all the images I'm referencing. Alright, let's get to it. The Tempter from Embassy Home Entertainment. Today, this Exorcist ripoff is best known by its original Italian title, L'Anticristo. But in 1988, when you would have been renting it on VHS, it was known as The Tempter.
She is no longer one of us. Her soul dwells in darkness, and her body belongs to the Tempter. Deliver her from evil. The Tempter. Rated R.
This picture was distributed on VHS by Embassy Home Entertainment. The cover's all black, with a black and white fisheye lens photograph of a woman in bed wearing a sheer nightgown, with the drapes in her bedroom fluttering open as if moved by some unseen force. It's a simple image that's kinetic, haunting, and suggestively erotic. It makes you feel like you're watching a supernatural event unfold through a peephole. And it promises a lot of things that the film itself does not deliver, even though the tagline is "Deliver her from evil." Aside from a shocking and tasteless black mass sequence in which a character the hole and of a goat, this picture is far less interesting than its evocative box art. Horror Express from Good Times Home Video and The House That Dripped Blood from Prism Video.
Take a ride on the Horror Express. Positively the most blood-chilling thriller ever conceived. Hurtling across the frozen Siberian tundra, the Horror Express rampages towards its destination of doom. Starring Telly Savalas and those masters of horror, Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee. Horror Express.
Misleading the customer with your VHS box was a very common occurrence. Such was the case with Horror Express and The House That Dripped Blood. Both are fairly cozy horror pictures, both starring Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing. Comfort movies for monster kids. Yet the box art for both suggests we're in for something a little more extreme. Horror Express was released on home video a bunch of times by a bunch of different distributors, both in the US and abroad, featuring a bunch of different box art. The one I'm referring to is the Good Times home video release. Good Times, with its familiar rainbow logo, specialized in distributing pictures with dubious copyright protections onto VHS for retail purchase. They were ubiquitous on rental shelves and in Kmart bargain bins alike. The cover art on their cardstock sleeves were pretty lazy and uninspiring, usually just a random still from the movie, often a black and white still that was amateurishly colorized. Their Horror Express box art was no different. It featured a still image of Telly Savalas, who gets top billing on the VHS cover, even though his character doesn't appear until the film's final act, bleeding from his nose and eyeballs. Cheap and lazy as it was, this bloody image managed to put me off watching Horror Express, a picture which wasn't all that gory and which bore a great deal of similarity to my beloved Hammer films during the height of my adolescent Hammer craze. The Prism video release of The House That Dripped Blood also sported grotesque cover art for a relatively tame and cozy horror picture. The director's preferred title for this anthology was Death and the Maiden. This title was deemed too highbrow, and though not a drop of blood is spilled throughout the picture, was released under the more lurid title of The House That Dripped Blood.
Terror waits for you in every room in the house that dripped blood. Vampires, vixens, and victims. You'll find them all in the house that dripped blood. Only the mind of the man who gave you Psycho could give you The House That Dripped Blood, in color from the Cinerama Releasing Corporation, rated GP.
In spite of the picture's bloodlessness, the theatrical poster and VHS box art feature a presumably nude woman seen from the shoulders up, holding a silver platter with Peter Cushing's severed head on it. Additionally, the woman with the platter has no mouth. Her face is a grinning skull below the nose. It's weird. Zombie from Wizard Video and Demons, New World Video. Now we're getting into the big boxes. Lucio Fulci's Zombie, released in Italy as Zombie 2 to fool people into thinking it was a sequel to George A. Romero's Dawn of the Dead, which was of course released in Italy and elsewhere in Europe as Zombie, came to US video stores in a Wizard Video big box. And that motherfucker sported a big head and shoulders close-up of one of the picture's most iconic zombies, a big decaying bastard with maggots dripping from his empty eye sockets. Easily one of the pukiest VHS boxes you were likely to encounter in your local mom and pop.
It is midnight on a tropical island. A beautiful young girl's long hair streams against the coral reef. Her beautiful body is caressed by the tide. Suddenly, a decayed hand rises up and blood-drenched jaws move to bite her. The living dead walk again. Zombie, you are what they eat. No one under 17 will be admitted. Zombie.
As a kid haunting the video racks, I was always drawn to this tape, but never brave enough to actually rent it. It's because of this box art that I avoided this, the granddaddy of Fulci's gut munchers, until college, when someone gave me a copy of the Anchor Bay release, under its Italian name Zombie 2, and I was at last introduced to the picture's fake zombie, real shark thrills. Equally scary, but not quite as pukey, was the box art for the New World Video release of Lamberto Bava's Demons. This bog-standard bottom-load slipcase with totally 80s hot pink lettering sports an image of one of the picture's titular demons. And boy, is it a doozy. All teeth and horns, and quite oozy looking after having just emerged from the body of Fulci regular Paola Cozzo.
The demons are coming, and they're coming for you. Be careful. They could mean the difference between life and demonic death. Demons. They will make cemeteries their cathedrals, and the cities will be your tombs. Demons.
Starts Friday at a theater near you.
This demon design sits alongside 1957's Night of the Demon for being perhaps the best realized practical effects depiction of a demon ever committed to film. That demon's mug made for some eye-catching box art. And unlike Zombie, this one didn't scare me away. The back of the box is pretty cool too, featuring my favorite image from the film, a horde of demon-possessed humans ascending the stairs, and all their eyes are glowing. Now, you heard me mention slide drawer boxes and book boxes. Well, it just so happens that... Hey, hang on a minute. What? Oh? Already? Folks, I just got word that the snack bar is about to close up. Last chance to grab some hot buttered popcorn, a sparkling soda, or maybe even a chili dilly. And here I was ready to talk for another hour about VHS boxes. Now, have you refilled on snacks? Nice and comfy? Good, because Act 2 of Octoberpod, featuring our friend Brenda from the podcast Horrifying History, starts now.
My name is Brenda, and welcome to Horrifying History, where you will hear about the unexplained, paranormal, and supernatural happenings that have stained the pages of history. For some, staying in a hotel is a necessity for work. For others, it is getting away from home to see and experience new things while having a safe place to lay their head at night. But there are very few hotels that fall into the category that the Cecil Hotel is in. This hotel in downtown Los Angeles was built to be a destination for business travelers and tourists, is best known as a hotbed of death. As a heads up here, my dear listeners, today we'll be talking about the deaths of people of all ages, along with suicide. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome to episode 104, The Cecil Hotel. There are some hotels that are well known due to their opulence. There are others that are well known as haunted destinations, but for some others, they are in a class of their own. One of these is the Cecil Hotel, which is located in downtown Los Angeles, California. This hotel has been the backdrop of TV shows like American Horror Story, movies, and multiple different docuseries. From the day this hotel's doors opened for service, multiple social and cultural issues impacted this establishment and helped create the reputation that it holds today. Its checkered history is full of misery and death. The Cecil Hotel took 3 years to build and opened for business in 1924. It was the pet project of 3 men, William Banks Danner, Charles Dix, and Robert Schwartz. Their plan was to create an opulent location for business travelers and tourists to stay at. The design drew upon French and Renaissance styles that were combined together to give a more modern feel and have a very unique and expensive look. Now, to give you guys an idea, in today's funds, this hotel cost almost $17 million to build. After its grand opening, the Cecil Hotel flourished as a fashionable place to stay, but then the Great Depression hit. The surrounding area started to decline, and eventually it was nicknamed Skid Row after the area became populated with transient people. Through the years, the 14-floor, 700-room hotel was refurbished as new owners would take over. As part of this, a portion of the hotel was rebranded in 2011 as Stay on Main. It had a separate reception area, but shared facilities with the other portion. In 2014, the Cecil was sold to New York hotelier Richard Bourne for $30 million. After this sale, a separate New York-based firm called Simon Barron Development acquired a 99-year lease on the property. In 2016, the president of Simon Barron Development made a statement saying that they were committed to preserving the architectural and historical significant areas of the Cecil Hotel, but they were planning to redevelop it and fix the now run-down property. The hotel closed in 2017 for renovations, but work was suspended indefinitely during the COVID pandemic. In December of 2021, the Cecil reopened as an affordable living complex and will be providing affordable living to about 600 low-income families. But many do not want to live there due to its reputation for violence, suicide, and murder. The first documented death at the Cecil occurred on the evening of January 22, 1927. 52-year-old Percy Cook and his wife were having issues, and after failing to reconcile with his wife and young child, he checked into the Cecil Hotel. That evening, Percy picked up a gun and shot himself in the head. After being rushed to a nearby hospital, Percy passed away that same evening. But that was not the only suicide at the Cecil. In the 1930s alone, it was home to at least 6 more. On November 19, 1931, W.K. Norton ended his life in his room by taking poison capsules. 1 week earlier, he had checked in under a different name, James Willies from Chicago. Now, to make his death even stranger, Mr. Norton was not from Chicago. He was from Manhattan Beach. Now, the next death occurred in September of 1934. 25-year-old Benjamin Dowich died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound to his head. He did not leave a note to tell us why. Then on July 26, 1937, 53-year-old former Army Sergeant Louis Borden picked up a razor and cut his own throat. Now, Lewis did leave several notes in which he said the reason he decided to end his own life was due to his poor health. In March of 1938 came the next death. Police were unable to determine for sure if it was accidental or if it was suicide. 25-year-old Grace Maggio fell from one of the windows on the 9th floor. Her fall was broken in part by telephone wires which wrapped themselves around her body as she fell. She passed away later at a local hospital, but due to there was no note or any indication of a struggle, police are unsure what actually happened to Grace that day. But that was not the case for Roy Thompson the following year. He also fell from the building, but in his case, the cause was clearly suicide. Several months later, another person died. His name was Erwin Neblett, and he was 39 years old. Erwin was a naval officer, and he was found dead in his room after ingesting poison. Was it purposeful, accidental, or was it forced? We'll never know. It is because of these deaths that the hotel gained its nickname of the Suicide. In the next decades, the Cecil was a site of even more death. In January of 1940, Dorothy Seeger checked into the hotel under the pseudonym of Evelyn Brent. Before she did, the 45-year-old woman sent her relatives a letter indicating that she was going to end her life. While in her room, she ingested poison, and she passed away in the hospital on January 12th. The next death occurred in September of 1944. 19-year-old Dorothy Purcell checked into the Cecil with her 38-year-old boyfriend, Ben Levine. Now, according to Dorothy, she had no idea that she was even pregnant when she went into labor in their hotel room. Her boyfriend was asleep, so she went into the bathroom, closed the door, and gave birth to a healthy baby boy. Thinking that her baby was deceased, Dorothy threw the child out of the room's window and he landed on the roof of the building next door. Now, after the baby was discovered, Dorothy was charged with his murder. At her trial, 3 different psychiatrists testified that Dorothy was mentally traumatized at the time of the incident, and in January of 1945, she was found innocent by the reason of insanity. Then came even more death. In November of 1947, Robert Smith died after he jumped from a window on the 7th floor of the hotel. In October of 1954, a woman checked into the Cecil under the name of Margaret Brown. Her real name was Helen Gurney, and she jumped out of the window of her room, which was also on the 7th floor. She died after she landed on the Cecil's marquee. Then, in February of 1962, Julia Moore checked into the Cecil. She died after jumping from her window of her room, which was on the 8th floor. She did not leave behind a suicide note, but left a bus ticket and her bank book that showed that she had a lot of money left in her bank account. The next deaths occurred a short time later on October 12, 1962. Pauline Otten, age 27, had checked into a room on the 9th floor. She jumped from the window of her room after fighting with her estranged husband, George. Now, George, after the fight, left the hotel. This is when Pauline decided to end her own life and jumped. She landed on an individual who just happened to be walking by and on her husband George, who was leaving the hotel. She killed them both instantly. Now, originally, police thought that Pauline and George commit suicide together. They changed their minds when they determined 2 things. Firstly, George had his hands in his pockets at the time of his death. Secondly, George was still wearing his shoes after his death. Now, if George had jumped, police determined that his shoes would have fallen off during the fall or on impact. They also recognized that no one would intentionally jump out of a window with their hands in their pockets. Then came the first documented murder at the Cecil. On June 4, 1964, a hotel worker discovered the body of a 65-year-old retired telephone operator in her room. The woman was nicknamed Pigeon Goldie and was well known in the area due to she fed the pigeons in a nearby park. She was found after she was beaten, sexually assaulted, and stabbed. Her room was ransacked. Several hours later, a man named Jacques Ellinger was arrested after he was seen walking through the park where Pigeon Goldie would feed her birds. He was covered in blood. After being charged with the murder, Jacques was cleared of the crime. It still remains unsolved to this day. Now, concerning the next 3 deaths, the victims are still not identified. On December 20th, 1975, a woman who registered at the Cecil as Allison Lowell checked into room 327. She jumped from a 12th floor window to land on the Cecil's 2nd floor roof. We still do not know her real name today. Then in September of 1992, a body of a man was found behind the Cecil. The man was of African American descent, approximately 20 to 30 years of age, and he was found in the alley right behind the hotel. Police believe that he either fallen or jumped or was pushed from the 15th floor. He still remains unidentified today. The last one occurred in June of 2015. The body of a man about 28 years of age was found outside the hotel. The county coroner publicly stated that the cause of death was not determined, but many believe that he also ended his life from jumping from this hotel. But the most famous death at the Cecil Hotel became the subject of a Netflix docuseries. It also has been incorporated as part of various horror movies, music videos, books, and has been the subject of shows like the Discovery Plus series Ghost Adventures. The person who died was 21-year-old Elisa Lamb. Elisa Lamb was born on April 30th, 1991, in Vancouver, British Columbia, in Canada. Her parents immigrated to Canada from Hong Kong before she was born, and it was said that she had an uneventful childhood. Elisa was a student at the University of British Columbia, but was not registered at the time of her death. Several years earlier, Elisa was diagnosed with bipolar disorder and depression. She was taking multiple medications for her conditions, but had a history of not taking them consistently. Due to this, Elisa suffered from hallucinations on several occasions that made her so fearful that she hid under her bed. It became so bad for her that she was hospitalized at least once for these episodes. By the mid-2010s, Elisa was an active blogger. She would post pictures concerning fashion and would speak about her life and her struggle with mental illness. In January of 2012, Elisa announced on her blog that she suffered from a relapse, and this resulted in her dropping several of her university courses. This left her with strong feelings of having no direction in her life. She felt lost and was worried that due to her withdrawing from her classes, that her transcript would look bad to those making decisions concerning her educational future. She was terrified that this could result in her not being able to continue with her education and attend graduate school. Then in 2013, Elisa decided to take a trip to California, alone. On January 28, 2013, she checked into the Cecil Hotel after being in Los Angeles for a couple of days. She would contact her parents on a daily basis and told her parents that she was given a shared room on the 5th floor. Soon, Elisa's roommates started to complain about what the hotel's lawyer said was odd behavior. After spending 2 days in a shared room, Elisa was moved into a room of her own. So what was the odd behavior? Well, according to the manager of the Cecil at the time of the incident, Elisa would lock the door to the room and demand that her roommates give her a password to enter. She also left notes for them that said things like, "Go home" and "Go away." It was further discovered that during this time frame, Elisa attended a live taping of the late-night show Conan, but she was removed from the premises by security due to she was exhibiting disruptive behavior. Then on the day that Elisa was due to check out and go to Santa Cruz, Elisa did not call her parents. They immediately called the police and then jumped on a plane to search for their daughter. What they found out was that on January 31st, 2013, which was the day that Elisa was supposed to call her parents, Elisa was alone at the hotel. According to the staff member who saw her, Elisa was outgoing, lively, and friendly. She told the staff member that she was getting gifts for her family and was wondering if a book she bought was going to be too heavy for her to carry as she continued her travels. And then, no one saw her again. Police asked the hotel if they had any video camera feed that may help with the investigation. They did, and the police released this footage to the public on February 13th, which was 1 week after Elisa went missing. There was about 2.5 minutes of footage, and you will find links to this footage in our show notes. Now, I'm going to give you a bit of a heads up here, my dear listeners. The footage is a bit disturbing. In it, Elisa enters the hotel elevator. She stares at the keypad and then peeks outside the elevator doors. Then she ducks back in and tries to hide in the area where the keypad is. She then slowly exits the elevator and makes some odd movements before entering the elevator again. She presses multiple buttons and then stands outside the elevators once more, making strange gestures. She then wanders away, and the doors of the elevators close without her being inside. When the police released this video, the video went viral. People started to speculate on why Elisa was acting this way, and one of the main theories was that perhaps Elisa was being chased by someone and that she was trying to escape them. Others thought that perhaps she took some street drugs that caused her to act this way. When her mental health issues reached the public, some people started to speculate that Elisa was perhaps suffering from a psychotic episode. But none of this mattered to her terrified parents, who only wanted for their daughter to be found safe and sound. But sadly, that was never going to happen. While the hotel was being searched for signs of what could have happened to Elisa, guests started to complain to the hotel staff about the water in their rooms. Some had low water pressure, while others complained that the water was discolored and had a strange taste. On the morning of February 19, 2013, a hotel maintenance worker went to inspect the 1,000-gallon or 3,785-liter tanks on the hotel's roof. They were trying to find the source of the problem. In one of the 4 tanks, the maintenance worker opened up a hatch to find the body of Elisa. She was lying face up and was naked. The clothes that she was seen wearing in the video were floating in the water and was covered with a sand-like particulate. She was also found with her room key and her watch. Her autopsy would tell us that she had no evidence of physical or sexual trauma. There was no evidence of suicide. Toxicology testing did show traces consistent with Elisa not taking enough or not taking her medication at all. There were also no recreational or legal drugs in her system, and she had a very small amount of alcohol detected that she ingested. On February 21, 2013, the Los Angeles Coroner's Office determined that Elisa died from accidental drowning and that her bipolar disorder was a factor in her death. But there were still a lot of questions like, how did Elisa get on the roof, and how could she get into that tank? Investigators discovered that even though the doors to the roof were locked and that staff were the only ones that had access, the roof was still easily accessible via the fire escape. But how did she get into the tank? Well, the lid to the tank that Elisa was found in was open when she was found, but who opened it to begin with? Did Elisa climb inside to hide and protect herself like she did when she would hide under her bed? One of the biggest issues with the investigation into Elisa's death was that the autopsy report was based on incomplete information. It does not tell if the body was searched for particulates or what results were from the rape kit that was completed. The coroner's office to this day believes that Elisa's death was accidental, but due to the history of this hotel, many people are not quite sure. But all these deaths are not the only things that helped create the paranormal reputation of this hotel. In our last episode, we told you the tale of Elizabeth Short, who is now known worldwide as the Black Dahlia. To give you all a brief reminder, 22-year-old Elizabeth went missing after she was last seen at the Biltmore Hotel in downtown Los Angeles. 6 days later, her mutilated body was found. Her murder is unsolved to this day and is now part of pulp culture. She became a cautionary tale for the dangers that Los Angeles could bring to young and trusting women. After Elisa disappeared, rumors started to link the two women together when people started to say that Elizabeth was seen at the Cecil Hotel on the night of her disappearance. As much as it may be true that Elizabeth could have visited the Cecil Hotel, there is no evidence to support this. So where did this rumor come from? It was derived from a police report that was submitted by Los Angeles police officer Merrill McBride. In this report, Officer McBride stated that she encountered a young woman who left a bar in downtown Los Angeles, and she claimed that somebody threatened to kill her. When Officer McBride saw pictures of Elizabeth, she did not identify Elizabeth as the person she saw. She also did not reference the Cecil Hotel as the location of where she saw this woman in distress. Even so, rumors still float around today that both Elizabeth and Eliza were both last seen alive at the Cecil Hotel. And then there is the fact that not just one, but 2 serial killers called the Cecil Hotel home for a short time. The first of these was Richard Ramirez, who is also otherwise known as the Night Stalker. Richard was born in El Paso, Texas, and had a very rough childhood. He would later claim that his father physically abused him so severely as a young child that it caused him to have multiple head injuries at a very young age. This reportedly resulted in him suffering from epileptic seizures. To escape the violence of his home, Richard spent a major portion of his time with his older cousin Miguel, and that was not a good thing. Miguel was a Vietnam veteran, and when he was there, he raped, tortured, and dismembered several Vietnamese women. He took photos of his evil deeds, and he showed them to young Richard with pride. When Richard was about 13 years old, he watched as Miguel shot his wife to death. Shortly afterwards, Richard changed from a small, scared boy to a sullen and cruel young man. He started to develop an interest in Satanism and began to take hardcore drugs. He soon became addicted. Now, even worse, he was still under the influence of Miguel, who was found not guilty of murdering his wife due to the reason of insanity. Soon, Richard developed the same kind of desire for sexual and physical violence that Miguel had. This is what he brought with him when he moved to Los Angeles. During the late 1970s and early 1980s, he was already known to police. His crimes at the time were limited to theft and drug possession, but he quickly escalated. His first documented murder took place in 1984 after DNA evidence linked him to a murder of a 9-year-old girl. He then killed a 79-year-old woman that June. He sexually assaulted her, stabbed her, and then slashed her throat. By March 17, 1985, Richard started his murder spree. That day, he assaulted a woman in her home and murdered her roommate. That same night, he shot and killed another victim. A little over a week later, he killed a 64-year-old man and his 44-year-old wife. It was here that he developed his signature killing style: shoot and kill the husband, and then assault and stab the wife to death. For months, Richard continued to murder more and more people. It's not like he even had a type. He would kill whoever was unlucky enough to cross his path. It didn't matter what your gender or your age was. If you came into his sights, you were done for. One of the most disturbing things about Richard's attacks was the satanic element that he added. Richard would often carve pentagrams into his victims' bodies, and in other times he would force them to swear allegiance to Satan. But ultimately, it was Richard's own arrogance that would be his undoing. After he was spotted near a person's home, he left a footprint behind. He also left his car and license plate in plain sight. When police tracked down the vehicle, they were able to match fingerprints in the vehicle to prints at his crime scenes. Soon, police found mugshots from Richard's previous arrests, and one of his surviving victims' description matched these photos. Police released Richard's picture and name to the press, and this is when Richard became aware that he was a wanted man. He tried to run, but he was tracked down by a vigilante mob who beat the pulp out of him until the police arrived and arrested him. Richard died in prison from complications from lymphoma in 2013. After committing some of the most brutal crimes that ever happened in California's history, Richard would come back to where he was staying, the Cecil Hotel. In the middle of the night, he would be seen in the back alley behind the hotel, covered in blood. He would take off his bloodied clothing and shoes and toss them into the hotel's dumpster. He would then walk up to his room on the 14th floor in either blood-stained underwear or completely naked. Now, you're likely all thinking right now, he would do this and no one would call the police? Well, you're correct. At this time, the Cecil was well known for being the place where criminals and serial killers could kick back and relax before they did their next dark act. And that is exactly what another serial killer did. This man's name was Jack Unterweger. Jack was born in Austria to a Vietnamese waitress and barmaid and an American soldier who met his mother in Italy. Jack's mother was well known to the law herself. After she was arrested in 1953, young Jack went to live with his grandfather, who regularly used the young boy to steal farm animals. Now, hearing this, you all shouldn't be surprised to hear that Jack was in and out of prison for most of his youth for theft, sex trafficking, and sexual assault. In 1974, Jack took it up a notch when he murdered an 18-year-old woman by strangling her with her own bra. He was sentenced to life in prison, and when there, it appeared that he was turning his life around. He started to write short stories, plays, poems, and an autobiography that was later used for a documentary on his life. In 1985, a campaign to pardon Jack started, but the Austrian president refused to have him released until Jack served the minimum of 15 years for his crime. Jack was released in May of 1990, and soon his autobiography was taught in schools. The children's stories that he wrote were now being performed on radio. He started to work for a local public broadcaster, where he was a crime reporter. Now, ironically, it was later discovered that he was reporting on the very same murders that he committed himself. Investigators later discovered, to their horror, that Jack killed a young woman in Czechoslovakia and 7 more women in Austria in the first year after his release. They were all strangled with their own bras. Then, the following year, he was hired by an Austrian magazine to write about crime in Los Angeles. While there, Jack stayed at the Cecil Hotel. He worked alongside local police and went on ride-alongs. But what they didn't know was Jack murdered 3 sex workers during this time. The women were beaten, sexually assaulted with foreign objects, and then strangled with their own bras. Before Jack went to Los Angeles, he was considered a suspect in the European murders. Police were keeping him under surveillance until he went to the United States, but they didn't see anything to connect him to all the killings. Eventually, with time, police did have enough evidence to make that connection. They went to his home to arrest him, but Jack and his girlfriend at the time fled before they arrived. Police chased him through Switzerland, France, and the United States until United States Marshals arrested him in Miami, Florida, while he protested his innocence. Jack was sent back to Austria and charged with a total of 11 murders, which included 1 in Prague and the 3 from Los Angeles. At trial, the jury found him guilty of 9 of the deaths, and he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. That same night, which was June 29, 1994, Jack committed suicide by hanging himself with a homemade rope that he made using shoelaces and a cord from the waistband of a pair of pants. Ironically, he used the same knots making his rope that he used when he strangled his victims. Now, with all of this darkness and death, should anyone be surprised that the Cecil Hotel is known as one of the most haunted places in Los Angeles? People regularly report unexplainable activity, and one of these is an individual named Pete Monazingo. Pete is a content creator who moved into an apartment across the street from the Cecil Hotel. In an interview by The Insider on March 9, 2022, Pete said that he did not know much about the old hotel when he moved into his new apartment, but he started to notice a lot of strange things were happening. So he started to do what a lot of people do. He began recording YouTube videos and TikTok videos of what he saw. At the time he started filming, the Cecil Hotel was closed for business. Even so, curtains would move and lights would turn on and off seemingly by themselves. Balcony doors would open and shut on their own. In addition to this, Pete says in the article that he personally saw many apparitions and shadows in the hotel's windows. Once at 2 a.m., he saw a man smoking a cigar on a balcony who was watching him. Pete ran from one side of his apartment to the other to see if this man was tracking him, and he was. At first, Pete thought this had to be his imagination, or maybe a homeless person got into the hotel. But then he started to think that maybe it was a spirit when he saw something again. This time, it was the silhouette of a person hanging on a top floor. After years of having strange occurrences, Pete started to try to gain access to the old building. He finally succeeded when a guard allowed him to go inside and get some footage. The first thing that Pete noticed when he entered the hotel was that he felt like he was being watched. He also felt very strange on the upper levels of the hotel, like there was just a very bad energy in the location. Now that the old hotel is being used for residential use, one can only imagine what the people of the present can stir up from the past.
Stick around after the credits for a brief word from some of our fellow indie podcasters, creators, and friends. There may even be some bloopers, outtakes, and bonus content as well.
Thanks for sticking around to the end. Be sure to follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.
Join us on Facebook at Horrifying History, on Instagram at Horrifying_History, on Twitter at HorrifyingHIST1, or reach out to us by email at horrifyinghistory@outlook.com. Now, if you'd love to take home a piece of Horrifying History, you really should check out our store. You'll find some great items by going to redbubble.com and by searching for Horrifying History in their search box. And if you want to get a bunch of amazing perks, like ad-free episodes, free merch, additional content, and much, much more, we are now on Patreon. Go to patreon.com/horrifyinghistory to sign up today. Thank you all for listening. And until next time.
You have been listening to Octoberpod. Octoberpod is produced, edited, and directed by Edward October. The series co-producers are MJ McAdams and Amber Jordan. Logo and banner graphics by Jessica Good. Edward October character design by Nick Calavera. Select still photography courtesy of unsplash.com. Select music cues by Dr. Dreamchip and various other stock music and sound effects courtesy of freesound.org. Music from Bigfoot Apocalypse and Thorax, theme from Octoberpod, composed by Nico Vitezi. All other images, music, and FX cues, except where noted, are sourced from within the public domain. Follow us on YouTube at Octoberpod Home Video, on Instagram, and the app I still call Twitter at OctoberpodVHS, and on TikTok and Blue Sky at Octoberpod. Or find us and all of our links on the World Wide Web at OctoberpodVHS.com. For business inquiries or story submissions, email octoberpod@gmail.com. If you enjoyed this program, we'd be very pleased if you told your friends about us. And while you're at it, write us a 5-star or equivalent review wherever you're listening. The man who spoke to you was Mr. Edward October.
Hola, amor.
Hola, cariño.
Y bienvenidos a Uy, qué horror, a Latinx horror movie podcast with Johnny
and Eileen. En este espeluznante podcast, we explore the often overlooked world of Latinx horror films. Cada semana, we watch and discuss horror films from different countries in Latin America,
or with a Latinx director,
or starring a Latinx lead.
Si es de horror y Latinx, we're watching it.
Nuevos episodios every Monday.
Listen to Uy, qué horror on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hello, Twisted Humans. Do you find yourself wanting to know more about the latest murder, conspiracy, cult, or haunting? Then this is the podcast for you. In 1952, there was a record high of UFOs reported. 1,500 sightings. There has been evidence of human sacrifice, devil worship, and it is haunted by more spirits than can be counted. A family of 2 adults and 2 kids reportedly saw a giant flying thing with glowing red eyes. And meanwhile, the family's nanny that helped Veronica to care for her and Lucian's children was found bludgeoned to death in the basement of their family home. I'm Alicia. And I'm Sierra. And this is Twisted and Uncorked.
I'm
Maddie.
And I'm Amber. And we're Witches Talking Tarot.
And we're bringing you all things occult.
Every Tuesday and Thursday, twice a week for your magical pleasure.
Join us as we dive into aliens,
cryptids, the Illuminati.
Super in the natural.
Because that's the kind of witches we are. So join these high energy witches twice a week. Come sit a spell and see why we'll be your favorites.
It's intermission time, folks. I'm fucking birds. Shut the fuck up. This is the ASMR portion of the show. Podcast host drinking Diet Pepsi from a plastic cup and crunching on the ice cubes. This has been Octoberpod ASMR Theater. Oh, heat pump and water running at the same time. Drinking podcast host drinks Pepsi from plastic cup while plane passes overhead in the distance. ASMR Theater. Clip for the Good Times Ident music. Good touch.